What comes to mind when you think of summer vacation memories? Splitting watermelons at the beach, barbecues by the river, festivals, and fireworks. This time, I'll be talking about an incident that happened during such a summer vacation. An event that's hard to put into words. It was an incident in which an innocent junior high school girl became the victim. The details about this culprit are truly unexpected. The Asahi Town Junior High School girl murder case in Mie Prefecture occurred on August 25, 2013 in Asahi Town, Mie District, Mie Prefecture. Hiromi Tarawa, a third-year junior high student, disappeared on her way home from a fireworks festival. At 10:55 p.m., she replied to a friend on LINE. But 5 minutes later, at 11 p.m., her friend stopped receiving replies from her. 4 days later, on August 29th, around 2:30 p.m., she was found without any clothes on in a vacant lot in Asahi Town. According to the autopsy, her cause of death was asphyxiation. Since there were no marks on her neck from being strangled with a rope or anything similar, it was believed that she was killed by having her mouth and nose forcefully covered. The investigation eventually led to the perpetrator's capture. However, the motive and what the perpetrator did afterward are truly infuriating. Now, let's look at the sequence of events in chronological order. On the day of the incident, August 25th in the afternoon, she went out with her friend to watch the Aichi fireworks festival. At 9:55 p.m., her older sister contacted her on LINE, asking when she would be coming home. She and her friend boarded a train at Japan Railway's Kansai Main Line Tomita Station. At 10:30 p.m., her older sister became worried because she was late and contacted her again on LINE, telling her to come home soon. She replied, "I told you I'm coming home." At 10:33 p.m., she arrived at Japan Railway's Asahi Station. At 10:34 p.m., the security camera at Asahi Station. She was seen on camera at around 10:45 p.m. Oku left her friend near Mie Asahi Interchange and walked alone around 10:50 to 10:55 p.m. A classmate sent her a LINE message saying they were going to karaoke now, and she replied, "Sounds good." And then, at 11 o'clock, she stopped replying to LINE messages. At 11:17, her older sister called, but she didn't answer, and her whereabouts became unknown. 2 days later, on August 27th, her father reported her missing to the police. 2 days later, on August 29th at about 2:30 p.m., she was found on her back in a grassy vacant lot in Asahi Town, wearing only her underwear. She was found. The cell phone she was supposed to have with her, her bag, and her wallet containing 6,000 yen in cash were missing from the scene. Police began investigating suspected robbery, murder, and corpse abandonment. A 90-officer task force was formed, involving 8,000 investigators who worked steadily and persistently. About 100 surveillance cameras were installed near the scene. They reviewed security footage and interviewed local residents nearby. The next day, August 30th, a bag and sandals believed to be hers were found nearby. Shoes, clothing, and fingerprints were found. But this did not result in the perpetrator's arrest. About 3 months later, on November 28th, the police announced a special investigation reward of up to 3 million yen for anyone who could provide valuable information leading to the arrest of the perpetrator. They decided to offer a reward. And finally, nearly 6 months after the incident occurred, on March 2nd, 2014, the police arrested the suspect. The police made a decision. He posted this on social media, Twitter, 4 days after the investigators came to his house. It appears to be a female junior high student from the city. My hands are shaking and I can't control my emotions. This is terrible. I'll restore peace to our town. A friend who pretended to have nothing to do with the incident the whole time joked, saying, "You're the culprit, aren't you?" He just laughed it off. Right after his arrest, the boy claimed he had an alibi and denied the charges. However, through the investigation headquarters' careful and thorough investigation so far, contradictions began to emerge. According to S's claim, he was already home by 10 p.m. However, at 10 p.m., he was seen at a supermarket near the scene. Security cameras confirmed he stayed there afterward. According to S's friend, he was home at 10 p.m., which suggests the testimony might be false. As suspicion grew stronger, S, feeling cornered, finally confessed, "I'm the culprit. I did it alone. I happened to see her and committed the crime out of sexual motives." Over half a day had passed since he voluntarily came in for questioning. Around 9:30 p.m., the investigation headquarters arrested him on suspicion of robbery and murder. He was taken into custody. The day before, the high school he attended held its graduation ceremony. He chatted with his friends, took the initiative to write messages in the group card, and seemed to cherish his last moments with them. Among his group of friends, he was shy. It's hard to believe, based on his appearance, that he could be the perpetrator of such a shocking crime. S confessed immediately after the arrest. The media reported that his friends couldn't believe it, saying he was really a good guy, so why? But the reality was different. Local residents who knew him have commented on how well he managed to control the media. In fact, in 2010, there was an unsolved case near the scene. S was revealed to have caused property damage, exposing his bad behavior. The only time the investigation headquarters contacted him before the arrest was on August 29, when the body was found. When investigators went to his home, S answered the door and, expression unchanged, claimed he knew nothing, repeating his earlier alibi. That's right, he acted as if he had nothing to do with it, and lived as though the incident had never happened until he was arrested later. S just happened to approach a girl he saw for indecent purposes, and also took her money, and then he killed her. I feel like there aren't many things as cruel as this. March 24, 2015 was the result of the lay judge trial. He was charged with causing death by forcible indecency and theft. He received an indeterminate prison sentence of 5 to 9 years finalized on September 17. I can't understand this verdict. Since it was ruled as causing death, S didn't intend to kill, but still strangled the victim. I understand that it's difficult to acknowledge that there was an intention to kill, but considering everything so far, I have to admit that S didn't have the intention to kill. I'm extremely frustrated with the current situation. This is a bit off topic, but my prefectural police are working to make arrests in this prefecture. They shared information announcing that the two would receive a total reward of 2 million yen. This was the first time our prefecture paid a special investigation reward for a case with an unknown suspect. An 18-year-old boy committed an extremely vicious and brutal crime in our prefecture. The sentence, which was set at no less than 5 years and no more than 9 years in prison, was finalized on September 17, 2015. In other words, it's possible he could be released as early as 2020. An indeterminate sentence, like 5 to 9 years in prison, is a punishment specific to juvenile cases. However, if this case were to be recognized as robbery-murder, he would be sentenced to at least 10 years in prison. It appears indeterminate sentences are seen as education, not punishment. In society, there is the concept of atoning for one's crimes. But what does atonement mean in this case? Something more important than the rehabilitation of the perpetrator is being neglected. I can't help but feel that way. The bereaved family also sought 100 million yen in compensation from S's family. As a result of the trial, they were ordered to pay 77 million yen. But S's parents refused this? They also have no intention of agreeing to a settlement. I know I've said this before, but he was innocent. Just a middle school student. He died because of the woman's selfishness. He was just a boy. Whether he was an adult or not, I don't think it changes the weight of the crime. From a human rights view, I know we must ensure fairness for the perpetrator. Still, a prison sentence of over 5 but under 9 years when a life is lost. I can't help but feel that it's far too light as compensation. I know that there will be many different opinions as everyone learns about this case, but above all, I sincerely hope that the approach taken will be one that stands by and supports the victim. I sincerely pray for the peaceful repose of Hiromi-san's soul. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. This is sudden, but I have a question. The movies I'll mention share something in common. What could that be? The Katsuragi incident, Sunny, Crime of Love, and Cold Fish. The correct answer is that these are works based on real-life incidents. The Katsuragi incident is inspired by the 2001 Ikeda Elementary School stabbing, while Sunny is inspired by the 2004 Sasebo incident. The 6th grade girl classmate murder case, Love's Sin, is based on the 1997 Tokyo Electric Power Company office, Lady Murder, while Cold Fish is based on the 1993 Saitama dog lover serial murders. They were inspired by very cruel incidents and have no happy endings. Many shocking societal incidents have later been adapted into films or television shows, and the case we're covering this time was also later adapted into a film. It's a heinous crime. The victim was dismembered alive in 2016, a crime that deeply violated human dignity. It was adapted into the film Shining a Light and Squeezing. The Shinjuku Shibuya Elite Dismemberment Murder Case. 200. In December 2016, a man's dismembered body was discovered in Tokyo. The remains were found one after another. On the 16th, the torso was discovered in Nishi Shinjuku, Tokyo, and then, on the 28th, the lower half of the body was found in Shibuya. The victim, as later discovered in the investigation, worked at a foreign investment company. Mr. Y, who was 30 years old at the time. Based on the condition in which the body was found, the police immediately determined that this was a murder case and began their investigation. This is how the case came to light. Initially, due to the brutal condition of the body and the nature of the area where it was found, it was thought to be the result of a conflict involving a Yakuza gang or the Chinese mafia. However, later, someone was arrested on suspicion of abandoning the body. The person was Mr. Y's wife. Mr. Y, the victim, was a high-income earner. He was an elite salaryman. His wife, who was married to such a man, was a celebrity wife that anyone would envy. So why did this happen? Why did she end up killing her husband and even going so far as to dismember him? Now, here are the details of the case. The two met before this incident occurred. It was about 4 years ago in November 2002. Mr. Y was working part-time at a law office and pursuing a law career, but had gambling debt. He was constantly chased by debt repayments and was living far from having any financial freedom. Meanwhile, the woman who became his wife was a well-known young lady and the daughter of a company president. After graduating, she landed a job at a major trading company and enjoyed a fulfilling life. Although they were such contrasting individuals, they were attracted to each other from the moment they met and soon began dating. The next month, they moved in together, and after she got pregnant, things progressed further. Just 4 months after they met, the two of them got married. Mr. Y, the family head, only had a part-time job, so she gave up on having the baby due to financial worries. Perhaps because of that background, just a few months after getting married, they started having arguments as a couple, and eventually it became a regular thing. That later became domestic violence by the husband against the wife. They continued their unhappy marriage until a turning point changed their lives. That was about 2 years after they married in 2005. Mr. Y was hired by a major foreign investment firm with an annual salary exceeding 10 million yen. Then, they moved into a luxury apartment in Shibuya Ward. They obtained what you would call a celebrity lifestyle. However, unfortunately, even though they gained that celebrity lifestyle, still, her husband's domestic violence continued. Because she exchanged emails with a male acquaintance, her nose was eventually broken and other things happened. She developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and at one point, she even had to escape to a shelter. She started thinking about divorce, and in order to gain an advantage over her husband, she was able to write a contract using a notarial deed. At that time, besides his wife, Mr. Y was also seeing another woman. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with that person rather than with his wife. In order to prove to his wife, Mrs. Y, who felt threatened by losing control over the divorce, that there was another woman, and to gain an advantage in the divorce, she set up a voice recorder at home. Eventually, she was able to obtain evidence of the affair. However, what was left on this voice recorder, instead of being pleased that the conversation might help her in the divorce, her hatred for her husband grew and eventually became murderous intent. On the morning of December 12, 2006, around 6 a.m., she killed him by repeatedly hitting him with a wine bottle. 2 days later, on the 14th, despite his 180-centimeter height, to dispose of Mr. Y's body, she sawed off the head, torso, lower body, and both arms, dismembering the body the next day, the 15th. She left the torso at the inn, the lower body in Shibuya, the head in a park in Machida City, and disposed of both arms as garbage. To avoid suspicion about her husband's absence, she filed a missing person report with the police, pretending it was from him. He left the company December 11th. He didn't come home on December 11th and hasn't returned since. After that, as I mentioned at the beginning, his torso was found in Nishi Shinjuku on December 16th. And then, on the 28th, the lower half of his body was discovered in the yard of an old house in Shibuya. The physical characteristics matched those of Mr. Y. However, the torso had no surgical scars, as she mentioned. The information from this torso is as follows. The victim was determined to be a foreign male in his 20s to 30s. And it was estimated that he had been dead for 1 to 3 days. The reason is that the discovery site is close to Kabukicho, because it's in Shinjuku, and the body was abandoned brutally. These are the facts. At first, the police thought it might be related to the Yakuza or Chinese groups, like a conflict involving the Mahua or something similar. They continued the investigation, and then more and more things were discovered. Dismembered bodies, estimated times of death, and characteristics of the bodies were found in Shinjuku. Because the upper body was similar, a DNA test was conducted. It was determined that all belonged to the same person. Furthermore, just then, around this time, there was also some progress on the police side. They became suspicious of her story. When investigators revisited the matter concerning Ms. Y, it was discovered that Ms. Y did not have any surgical scars. Additionally, when they reviewed security camera footage from the apartment building where both lived, it was revealed the claim Ms. Y didn't return home was also false. And then, about a month after the dismembered body was discovered, she was arrested on suspicion of abandoning a corpse. After her arrest, based on her statement, the head was found in a park in Machida City. However, it had been thrown away as garbage. The arms were never found. She couldn't get along with others and felt rejected. She was subjected to violence and developed murderous intent toward him. That's what she had experienced until then. She said compensation for the mistreatment wasn't enough, so she killed him. That's how she explained her motive. After struggling with domestic violence and infidelity, she committed the crime. But did he really die? Is that true? There was domestic violence and infidelity, but she decided to get a divorce and tried to get as much alimony as possible. The trial began afterward. There, her unknown true nature began to be revealed one after another. The first trial was held about a year after the arrest, on December 20, 2007. That day, both sides called their affair partners as witnesses. That's right. She also had an affair partner. She worked part-time in the adult entertainment industry as a student, and then she became a mistress to one of her clients, and that relationship continued even after she got married. The prosecution has also pointed out that there were several other men involved with her. Furthermore, it was a lie that she worked at a major trading company after graduating from school. She often exaggerates her past and frequently shoplifts. Her hidden truths have been revealed one after another. These facts have come to light. The second half started oddly, with him as the main issue. The issue was if the woman was responsible and sane during the crime. She heard her husband's voice while disposing of the body. She saw her husband reflected in a mirror at the police station. In this way, she claimed to have symptoms of hallucinations and hearing voices. The defense attorney claimed she was insane and not criminally responsible, so pleaded not guilty. However, it arrived. On April 28, 2008, due to the clear and premeditated motive, as well as the disposal of the body and attempts to cover up the crime, Tokyo District Court ruled on the attorney's death. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She appealed the decision, but the appellate court also found the original verdict appropriate. On June 22, 2010, her prison sentence was finalized. Right now, as I'm making this video in February 2022, in just 3 more years, she will return to the world we live in. I never felt like I belonged anywhere, and many things happened during my marriage. Looking back now, she learned both the difficulty and the value of living an ordinary life. And it was around the time when she was troubled by her divorce. She recorded these feelings in her notes. Raised in a wealthy family, she was envied by all. She graduated from a prestigious women's university, and what she wanted most, even as she was celebrated as a celebrity wife. That was an ordinary life. However, she says, what kind of life was an ordinary life, really? Even though she was in a privileged environment, she still couldn't find happiness. Was it because of her family? or her husband? What about her own way of being? I think this is something that applies to each and every one of us. Are there things we just can't control ourselves? Of course, there are big problems, but when something happens, before blaming others, I think what we should do first is reflect on ourselves. We struggle daily, face conflicts, and endure, which helps us grow and find small moments of happiness. This isn't something given to you by others. It's something you seize with your own strength. I hope every day will be better for all of you. Lastly, those who became victims in this case, I sincerely pray for the soul of Mr. Y. Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Sasebo high school girl murder case. Around 6:40 p.m. on July 26, 2014 in Sasebo City, Nagasaki Prefecture, she had gone to a friend's house to hang out. 15-year-old high school freshman Iwa Matsuo told her mom she'd be home by 7 p.m. After that message, her whereabouts became unknown. In response, the police immediately began an investigation. Around 3:20 a.m. the next day, on the 27th, the police went to the apartment where her friend, whom she had gone out with, lived. What they saw there was an unbelievably gruesome scene. I'll omit the details about her, but later investigations revealed that her cause of death was asphyxiation from being strangled with a cord. At around 6:10 that day, police discovered she had been living alone in the apartment where the murder occurred. Tokukatsu Moemi, then 15, was urgently arrested before the body was found. When questioned by police about the person's whereabouts, she claimed ignorance and tried to cover it up. However, after her arrest, she calmly underwent questioning and admitted, "I did everything myself." She stated in a calm manner, "I wanted to kill and dismember a person. I wanted to see what was inside. Why did such an incident happen? What kind of person was Shigenami Tokukatsu?" She was born into a wealthy family in Sasebo City. Her older brother attended a famous public university in Tokyo, and her father was so well known locally that everyone knew him. He was renowned as both a lawyer and a speed skater. Her mother graduated from the University of Tokyo and served as a member of the city's Board of Education, being deeply involved in educational activities. She put her heart into educational activities. P.I. inhale, 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 inhale. Her excitement and madness grew as she kept reading medical books and repeatedly killed and dissected cats. Afterward, she became the subject of school rumors and was even monitored by local police. It was also around this time that it was discovered she had a severe autism spectrum disorder. Her mother was concerned about her abnormal behavior. After junior high, her mother encouraged her to study abroad. However, in October 2013, while in junior high, when she was in her third year, her mother died of pancreatic cancer, and her plans to study abroad were canceled. And then, on March 2nd, 2014, she finally turned that impulse toward her family. She struck her sleeping father's head multiple times with a metal bat. The murder attempt failed, but her father's skull was fractured, and he was hospitalized immediately. The incident became known at school. In a later interview, she said she wanted to kill someone, and that it didn't matter who. This is a very serious issue, but her father did not make it public. It was because he was concerned about her social reputation and his own image. When she was in 6th grade and mixed medicine into the school lunch, he pleaded with the victim's parents not to escalate the situation. Also, he left all child rearing to the mother. At that time, the mother said her husband didn't help with raising the child at all. She lamented she couldn't stay with a husband who avoided their child and wanted to separate soon. Less than 6 months after her mother died, her father introduced his new wife to her. It's not hard to imagine that her father's actions, before she could heal from the loss of her mother, and his hasty decisions as a parent, may have had some kind of impact on her as a young girl. And at some point, an irreparable rift formed between her and her father. In spring 2014, she feared for her life. Her father, claiming she was preparing to study abroad, had her live alone. June 10, 2014. The psychiatrist, fearing the worst possible outcome from her, contacted the Child Consultation Center. Even her father finally considered admitting her to a psychiatric hospital. On July 25, 2014, the day before the incident, he called the Sasebo Child and Women Disability Support Center, but only reception was available due to summer hours. He was turned down and told to try again another day because business hours were over. The next day, July 26, the school and her father's efforts failed. She was arrested immediately after the incident occurred. About a year later, on July 13, 2015, after being sent to family court, she was placed in a facility for people with significant disabilities due to environmental factors and being under 16 and subject to the juvenile law. It was decided that she would be sent to a Type 3 juvenile training school. At this time, the juvenile law had not yet been amended. Around 2014, her father, who faced heavy criticism because of her, couldn't bear it anymore and ended up hanging himself at home. Her older brother, who was a sophomore at a famous private university in Tokyo at the time, also committed suicide. Not only the family, but also the fact that both the victim and the perpetrator were high school girls had a shocking impact, influencing many media outlets. On Miracle Experience Unbelievable, segments reminding viewers of this case were replaced, and similar edits occurred in the anime Psycho Pass. Episode 4 of the new edited version was cancelled, and Episode 5 was re-aired. These kinds of considerations show just how much attention this case was receiving. What exactly drove her to do this? What could have been done to prevent such a tragic incident from happening? Experts shared different views. Her mother's death and father's remarriage caused her loneliness. She resented the victim for having a mother and wanted to make her own parents proud through her studies. Eventually, her suppressed emotions erupted. During adolescence, she faced someone's death, making her deeply aware of mortality. Who should be killed? It wasn't just anyone. I wanted to dismember her because she was my best friend. Also, among the opinions, there are some that point out issues the person has been carrying from the beginning. The 2010 foreign substance contamination incident caused by the perpetrator cannot be overlooked. Just as it is clear that the victim qualifies as a child in need of protection at the point when she struck her sleeping father's head with a metal bat, there were also voices saying that if she hadn't been neglected, she might not have ended up killing someone. However, all of these remain mere speculation. Only she herself knows the truth. This case was caused by a young girl born into a wealthy environment. She was stressed and kept sending Save Our Souls signals to others. If she had someone to support her, maybe her future would have been different. But no matter what we say about what has already happened, nothing will change. However, we can change what happens from now on. For those who are struggling with similar issues or facing such realities, I hope that even a little, something will change for the better. She, sent to juvenile detention, is still being rehabilitated. Type 3. Juvenile detention centers house those in protective custody until age 26. In other words, she will likely return to society around 2024. I sincerely hope that after returning to society, she will face this case head-on, and also those who were victimized. I pray for Iwa Matsuo's soul. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Take an interest in various things. When I was a child, the adults around me used to tell me that. Aren't there quite a few people like that? If it's about studying or sports, people around you are impressed and feel relieved. But what if a boy who looks ordinary in front of you says, "What I'm most interested in is killing people"? If that happened, what could you say to him? The Aichi Wakamatsu City Matricide Incident. Early morning, May 19, 2007. A 17-year-old boy. Kay carried a school bag and went to the police station. There, Kay told the officer, who responded, that he had killed his mother. He then calmly showed the contents of his bag. Inside, there was a severed head, believed to be that of the boy's mother. After grasping the situation, the police officer immediately headed to Kay's apartment. What he saw there was the corpse of the mother lying on the futon, and a flower pot with a human arm growing out of it. Kay later said his motive was wanting to experience killing someone. He spoke calmly, displaying no sadness, agitation, or regret. What was Kay's background? I'd like to examine the details of his upbringing and the events surrounding the incident. Kay was born in Kaneyama Town, Fukushima Prefecture, to a father at an agricultural cooperative and a mother with a childcare qualification. He had an ordinary upbringing and life. In junior high, he excelled academically and athletically, becoming baseball team captain in his second year. He competed in ski jumping and alpine skiing. He competed at the prefectural and national levels and truly embodied leadership in academics and sports. He left sports to study for high school entrance exams, then enrolled in a new school in Aizu Wakamatsu City in April 2005. He lived in a boarding house for a year because his younger brother chose a different high school in the city. Starting from his second year, he began living with his younger brother in an apartment in Aizu Wakamatsu City. Their mother would visit the apartment once a week to take care of them. Up to this point, if you look at it, she searched for her body, and he, the corpse. She searched for the body and his death. The boy is there in the comments section. That's right, Kihari. She tried to look for his body. What is he thinking? Where is he? Kay gives off that kind of impression, but around the end of his first year, a sudden change like this happens. He dyes his hair brown and cites insomnia, headaches, and stomach aches as reasons. He frequently skips school, glares at students he passes in the hallway, and chews gum during class. He doesn't take care of his hair or nails at all. And until he became a second-year student, and even after that, the situation didn't change. Kay also skips the school trip, and after that, he hardly comes to school anymore. After becoming a third-year student, he only attended school for 5 days in 1 month. Kay spent most of his time alone in his apartment, watching horror movies and reading brutal manga nearly every day. Seeing this situation, Kay's homeroom teacher contacted his mother to inform her that he wasn't coming to school. However, since his mother lived apart from him, she didn't even know that Kay was missing school. However, after that, his mother told the school that Kay was absent. She explained the reason like this. Kay visited the hospital for migraines and was diagnosed with a developmental disorder. The school was instructed not to encourage his attendance or provide attendance stimulation. In response to that, the school also decided to monitor the situation. However, Kay harbored that madness within himself. It was a few days later that he put it into action. Around 1:30 a.m. on May 19, 2007, Kay was looking down at his mother in a dimly lit room, and then, aiming at his mother's neck, he held it in his hand. He plunged the kitchen knife in, slicing the artery with one fatal blow, causing blood to spatter heavily. Afterward, he repeatedly cut her neck, and the mother died nearly decapitated while still alive, killed by her son. That day was actually his mother's birthday. After that, Kay did what he had prepared. He used a saw to cut off his mother's right arm around the shoulder. Then, after spraying white paint all over it, he stuck the severed arm into a flower pot, making it look as if it was growing from there. When he returned to Kay's house, when he came back to Kay's house, when he returned to Kay's house, when he came back to Kay's house, when he returned to Kay's house, when he came back to Kay's house, when he returned to Kay's house, when he came back to Kay's house, when he returned to Kay's house. A large number of horror movie DVDs and magazines were seized. As for the motive for the crime, Kay said he watches horror movies. I just felt like killing someone at home. Who was the target? It didn't really matter. Even my younger brother would have been fine. He said, if there were a war, I could kill. About cutting off his mother's arms and neck, he said, I chopped them up into pieces and hung them from the ceiling. He said that's what he thought. And in fact, ropes and hooks were found at the scene. But it's believed he gave up because he thought his younger brother would notice. After that, K was sent to the family court. And then, on February 26, 2008, the Fukushima Family Court, based on the results of 2 psychiatric evaluations, recognized K as having full criminal responsibility. They decided treatment and education were needed. They handed down a protective measure called the Medical Juvenile Institution, bringing this case to a close. As I investigated this case, 2 things crossed my mind. These incidents involved adolescence and mass shootings in America. This case happened during adolescence. In October 2005, a 16-year-old high school girl used a toxic substance on her mother. She tried to kill her by forcing her to drink Valium. That was the incident. However, I felt that there were many similarities between this girl A and the current case. Girl A was an excellent student, and at the time had a strong interest in poisons. To study poison effects, she experimented on nearby animals, and before long, she began to wonder how effective it would be on humans. And out of that curiosity, she started giving thallium to her mother. Then her mother suddenly became seriously ill, surprising the girl with the severity of the symptoms. She started thinking like this: if I'm going to get caught, I might as well kill her. She continued giving her mother thallium, which eventually put her mother in a coma from poisoning. But somehow, her mother managed to survive. At that time, her favorite book was The Graham Young Poisoner's Diary. Graham Young was a British murderer who killed 3 people, including his own family members. He poisoned people like a demon, observing his victims and noting their conditions in a notebook. Following his example, Girl A also kept records on her blog, observing and documenting her mother's gradual decline. After her arrest, A stated that she wanted to find out how long it would take for someone to die. Like the previous case, she was sent to a juvenile medical institution. Regarding these 2 incidents, in the book by social psychologist and Tohoku University professor emeritus, Mr. Obuchi, titled Ordinary Children Who Kill Their Parents, The Commonplace Nature of Ordinary Families, when you read about the dangers brought by expectations, it says that the emotional instability and increased impulsiveness unique to adolescence become important factors leading to acts like murder, and that these can happen even in ordinary families. An abnormal obsession with murder or violent death can lead to committing murder. It's probably not a coincidence that these cases are relatively more common among younger people than adults. Before the incident, he spent nearly every day in a dark room watching horror movies and reading violent comics. He stayed alone, letting his imagination run wild about murder. Don't you think that his daily life, in which he continued to amplify his murderous fantasies with the unstable mind characteristic of adolescence, made his personality even more dangerous? The word adolescence is often seen as a period of preparation for adulthood, but depending on how one spends this time and the direction of their thoughts, it may carry dangerous elements. I'll also discuss mass shootings in America from here. Gaha said he was interested in incidents at American universities. That's right. In that incident, K killed his mother. It's about the Virginia Tech shooting that happened a month ago. Cho Sung-hui, the Korean student responsible for the incident, was always alone and never opened up to others. He submitted violent essays in class and was repeatedly advised to seek counseling. He was considered a problem child by his teachers. His classmates found him creepy and often ridiculed him. He shouted curses at those around him. He opened fire at the school, taking the lives of 32 people before committing suicide. As he learned more about the perpetrator of this incident, didn't he start to see himself in that lonely killer? The perpetrator of this case. K and the girl, A, developed a strong interest in murder and poisons due to adolescent instability and impulsiveness. Their curiosity soon became fantasies of trying it themselves. Learning about someone who acted on such fantasies made them identify with that person, weakening the barrier against committing murder. I believe they followed a similar process of reaching for the switch. For K, it was Cho Sung-hui. For A, it was poison. Could Graham Young from the diary have been a mentor and trigger for murder? With proper treatment and education, rehabilitation is possible. Based on that judgment, he was sent to a juvenile medical institution. But is that really the case? One murderer has said that the time spent in the juvenile institution was completely meaningless. Over 15 years have passed since this incident. K is almost certainly thought to have rejoined society. He could now be your neighbor. Watching this video, Or perhaps the person you see every morning on the same train. And just like all of you, he might be watching this video right now. I can only hope that K's current interests and impulses do not lead him to the mistake of murder again. Lastly, in this case, the person who became a victim. I sincerely pray for the repose of his mother's soul. Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Have you ever attended a cram school for entrance exams or anything like that? Some of you might even be going right now. Even though you're there to study, the atmosphere is different from school, and people's attitudes vary. On the other hand, cram school instructors also come in various forms, from part-timers to full-time employees. And just because someone can teach you doesn't necessarily mean they're a decent person. The Uji Cram schoolgirl murder case. Around 9 a.m. on December 10, 2005, a girl was killed at a cram school in Uji City. Sayano Horimoto, who was 12 years old at the time, had been attending the cram school where the incident took place for about a year. The perpetrator of this case was Yu Hagino, who was 23 years old at the time, and the incident took place there. He was the Japanese language teacher at the cram school she attended. Until she was killed, he was the perpetrator. She was troubled by Yu Hagino's bizarre behavior and words. That led to the worst possible outcome. What exactly happened between the two of them and the woman? And what was the nature of Yu Hagino's abnormality? Now, here are the details of the case. It had been some time since she started attending the cram school on May 11, 2005. That day, Yu Hagino kept her alone after class, claiming to give individual Japanese instruction. He asked her question after question. Do you like school? Cram school? Your father? Or Japanese class? The questions continued after that. That time lasted for about an hour and 20 minutes. I like school, cram school, and my dad. In response to what she said, he declared, I'm studying to be a psychological counselor, so I can tell when Sayano-chan is lying. And after that, he completely denied everything she said. I think being denied everything pushed her to the edge emotionally. On her way home that day, as soon as she saw her mother who came to pick her up, she burst into tears. After that, I heard the whole story from her. Her parents felt uneasy about Mr. Hagino at the cram school. They contacted the school about this, but the cram school did nothing to address it. His strange words and actions continued. During the personal interview, he came close to her and brought his face near hers. He acted like it was a coincidence when he joined her in the games during break. She experienced inappropriate touching from the instructor, who was meant to protect her, making it feel like harassment by a stalker. That anxiety was far too much for her to bear alone. It never subsided. Every time she told her parents about his strange behavior, they contacted the cram school to complain. However, nothing was ever done about it, and, frighteningly, his behavior escalated even further. On November 21st, she finally reached her limit and told him that she would no longer attend his Japanese class. Then he took her to the back of the staff room and persistently pressured her in an intimidating manner, asking, why? All the instructors witnessed this scene. Considering that her parents had repeatedly complained to the school, it's hard to believe that the other staff members knew nothing about the trouble between the two. Supporting this, his strange behavior was frequently witnessed by other students at the school as well. In class, if he liked a girl, he'd ask, do you understand this problem, Maru-Maru-chan? He would hold their hands or touch them. Furthermore, after class, he would call the girls over and touch their bodies while talking to them. However, none of the other staff members pointed out his abnormal behavior. And then, on December 10th, the day of the incident, a mock exam for junior high school entrance was scheduled to be held. Hagino was assigned as exam supervisor, but there were concerns about issues with her. Based on the decision of the head of the cram school, that morning, another male instructor was assigned to be the exam supervisor. Because of that, he didn't need to come to the cram school, but he showed up anyway. He asked the exam supervisor, another instructor, if he could conduct a Japanese language survey before the mock exam, and first had the supervisor leave the room. And then he said he wanted to conduct the survey one by one. He left only her in the room, had the other students leave the classroom, locked the entrance, and slowly approached her from behind, as she sat in her chair, with the notebook he had hidden in one hand. When this incident was discovered, the classroom walls were stained bright red with blood splatter. After that, he called the police himself on the spot and was arrested. Then, on February 20th, 2006, the first trial was held at the Kyoto District Court. He admitted all the basic facts, saying there was no mistake. He nursed one-sided distrust and hatred, driving him mad. The office had prepared in advance, and footage from inside the classroom was also shown. The prosecution pointed out that there was clear intent and planning, such as unplugging the monitor's power cord in advance. They argued that he was fully responsible for his actions and requested life imprisonment. In response, the defense argued that he was in a state of insanity at the time and sought either acquittal or a reduced sentence. On March 6, 2007, the trial's second half took place. The judge acknowledged his full criminal responsibility and voluntary surrender, since he called 110 right after the crime and sentenced him to 18 years in prison. However, in response to this, both parties appealed, moving the proceedings to a higher court. 2 years later, it was determined that Hagino had diminished mental capacity during the crime. 3 years after the first trial, the original 15-year prison sentence was finalized. The reason for his diminished mental capacity was that he suffered from hallucinations of being attacked by her. Asperger's. His disability and difficulty coping with stress were considered. After that, her parents claimed that this cram school had violated its duty of care by failing to prevent the accident. They filed a civil lawsuit for damages. The Kyoto District Court ruled in favor of the parents and ordered the cram school to pay about 98 million yen. This case comes to a close here, but why? Did Hagino harm her because of her strangeness? The question still remains unanswered. From here on, I will touch a little on the background of the perpetrator of this case, Yu Hagino. The Yu Hagino case. He was 23 and an executive at a major electronics subsidiary. His father taught yoga and Tai Chi. He was born to his mother. In the neighborhood, his family was known for being strict with discipline. Snack foods were forbidden. Even when friends came over to play, they were sent home if it was considered a distraction from studying. His strict parents often scolded him and sometimes locked him in the bathroom. Was it because of the overly strict discipline he received as a child? From the time he entered university, his attitude toward his parents began to change. Domestic violence began. At home, he acted like a king. There was a time when his mother was taken away in an ambulance. This is what the neighbors testified. In 2003, 2 years before this incident occurred, he repeatedly committed theft. He targeted female students' wallets and bags on the university campus. There were as many as 20 such cases. Furthermore, during the thefts, he injured a security guard by hitting him. Because of that, he was charged with theft and assault. He received a suspended prison sentence. The university imposed a fixed-term suspension of 1 year and 6 months. And then, in November 2003, he started working part-time as an instructor at the Cram school, where this incident occurred. Also, what he submitted to the Cram school. His arrest record was not mentioned in his resume, and the Cram school hired him without knowing anything about it. Although he had repeatedly committed theft before, he later behaved politely and appeared to want to reform after the theft and assault incidents. That's right. But he committed this incident less than 2 years after the theft case. He is supposed to be someone you can rely on and be protected by. Despite repeated strange words and actions from the instructor and desperately calling for help, the Cram school did nothing to address the situation. As the harm escalated and she was killed, I believe the fear she experienced was far beyond anything we can imagine. The inmate, Hagi, is scheduled to be released in a few years. I can't help but feel outraged. I sincerely pray for the soul of Sayano Horimoto. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. On June 1, 2004, in Okubo Elementary School's hallway in Sasebo City, that girl stood silently, covered in blood. Natsumi Tsuji, age 11, held a box cutter, her blood-stained hakama pants wet. It was as if an overwhelming amount of blood was stuck to her. Seeing this, her homeroom teacher immediately took the box cutter away from her. The homeroom teacher thought she was injured and was concerned about her well-being. Then, she muttered a few words. "It's not my blood, it's not me." She was standing there. She pointed in the direction of the study room, which was not far from the hallway. I immediately headed to the study room. What the homeroom teacher saw was her classmate, Remi Mitarai, lying on the floor covered in blood. It was a gruesome scene. The case I'm going to introduce today is a shocking incident where an elementary school student killed a classmate. For some reason on the internet, the girl who committed the murder was given the nickname Nevada Tan. She became oddly popular after getting that nickname. What made her commit murder? And what caused this unusual excitement online? The victim was Santarai, and she were initially good friends and belonged to the same mini basketball team, which was managed by Santarai. They shared the website password and also had a common hobby of drawing. However, in February 2004, when they were in 5th grade, the perpetrator Tsuji was forced to leave the mini basketball team by her mother because her grades had gotten worse afterward. Perhaps because she lost one of her few places of belonging, being originally introverted. Her mental state grew more unstable. Actually, at that time, her class was in a state similar to classroom collapse. Taking advantage of that, she started sleeping during class. She also began to use violence against her male classmates. From March, she started keeping an exchange diary with several of her classmates. In early May 2004, Tsuji used the expression "next maru maru" in her diary. The classmates in the exchange diary copied that, which she disliked. She insisted on banning the use of "next maru maru." Most of her classmates stopped using this expression. Only Santarai, the future victim, argued that "next" is just English and not copying. It was a minor incident, but this was when a rift formed between them. Around late May during play, Santarai gave her a piggyback ride and commented that she was heavy. She replied, "How rude." But afterward, Santarai wrote on his website that the way she spoke was cutesy. She saw that and logged into the site using the shared password. She deleted that post and even changed the avatar without permission. However, Santarai made a similar post again, and also wrote a provocative comment about the unauthorized changes. This made her anger reach its peak. She broke into Santarai's website again and, unbelievably, reset the entire site on May 31st. Even so, her anger didn't subside. She seriously thought about how to kill Santarai or what to do to him. That's right. Then, inspired by a drama she had been watching, she came up with a way to kill him. And on the next day, June 1st, during the break after the second period, Santarai wrote that he wanted to leave the exchange diary. She gave the note to a classmate, then said, "That's right. If anything, I'll do it all." At 12:15, the incident occurred as lunch preparations began at the school. She asked Santarai to step aside and took him to a different learning area instead of the classroom. She led him to the room, closed the curtains, and had him sit on a chair. Then, covering Santarai's eyes with her own hand, she repeatedly slashed his neck and left hand from behind with a katana knife. The cuts were so deep that the bone was visible, and a large amount of blood flowed out. After that, she didn't leave the scene immediately. For about 15 minutes, she wiped up the blood with a handkerchief, looked closely at Santarai's face to make sure he wasn't moving, and touched his body. At 12:35, after preparing lunch, the class said, "Let's eat together." Then, the homeroom teacher saw that 2 students were absent. Hearing running in the hallway, the homeroom teacher rushed over and found her standing, covered in blood. This is where we reach the opening scene. The homeroom teacher rushed to the study room, shouting, "Ambulance! Ambulance!" He tried to stop Santarai's bleeding. The scene was shocking. The teachers and staff who later checked the scene showed signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. After that, she was taken to the police and interrogated for 40 minutes, and she immediately admitted, "I cut him with a cutter. I planned to kill on Saturday. Tried on Monday the 9th, but feared getting caught, so I did it today. I waited until he died, then went back to the classroom so I wouldn't get caught. I used a box cutter to make sure I could kill him for sure." An elementary school student killed a classmate. The shocking incident was covered on television every day in no time. But things escalated to an abnormal level on the internet. Because she generally appeared cute, she quickly became the center of attention. She was petite and wore baggy clothes. Her clothes said Nevada, so she was nicknamed Nevada Tan and drew attention. Her illustrations and cosplay spread, and a band overseas even used her name. A week after the incident, on June 8, 2004, in a Nagasaki home, the Sasebo branch of the court decided to hold a juvenile hearing, and a lawyer met with her to hear her story. She said she wanted to meet and apologize at that time. That's right. After checking her responses, The lawyer thought she was very immature. He said that even though she was in 6th grade, she gave the impression of being about a 4th grader. Another lawyer also said that she wasn't very tall, and her expression was childish, but there were 1,000 attendants. However, the handwriting she used to sign the delivery was firm, so they commented that maybe she wasn't as childish as her expression suggested. After that, it was suggested that she might have a developmental disorder. A psychiatric evaluation lasting 3 months was conducted, and the results showed that although she was significantly behind her peers emotionally, it was not something that should be considered a disorder. And then, on September 15, 2004, at 10:30 ante-meridiem, the Nagasaki Family Court ordered her placement in a juvenile self-reliance support facility with a protective measure allowing compulsory action for up to 2 years. And then, in the spring of 2008, 4 years later, she left the facility and returned to society. Very few people know what happened to her after that, because that information is protected for her reintegration into society. Because revealing it would hinder her reintegration, everything is kept confidential. As of 2021, she is 28 years old. A few people remain concerned about her whereabouts, and rumors continue to circulate. Some people say that she was adopted by a supporter, while others say that she married her own fan and even has children. Even though she was angry, why did it go so far that she ended up killing her classmate? Let's talk about the reason behind it. Experts say it's because she had few opportunities to interact with friends. The bus route she used to commute to school had very few buses running each day. She rarely spent time with classmates after school, making her introverted. The only thing she participated in was a mini basketball team, and that became her emotional support. I think that if she had more opportunities to interact with people who had different values from her, and if she had learned how to let out her stress and worries, things might not have turned out this way. What is she thinking and how is she living now after becoming a murderer in elementary school? Is that something only she can know? Maybe so. I believe incidents like this should never happen again. At the same time, in this age where the internet is so much a part of our lives, it makes us reconsider how we interact with and use it. I sincerely pray for Ms. Iremi's soul to rest in peace. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. They investigated a mysterious case as someone killed detectives and reporters. In suspense dramas and such, you've probably seen it at least once. It's a typical development in dramas. That's why we believe it doesn't occur in real life. But is that true? I was investigating the truth behind a case. A freelance writer, a man. The person he followed was linked to several mysterious cases, including the well-known Petit case he was investigating then. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Petit case at least once. He was investigating that kind of case. He was stabbed over and over again and eventually killed. His body was later found in Tokyo Bay. This case is cloaked in mystery. What did he know, see, or seek? Only Sumaya Satoru knows the truth behind the case. The freelance writer murder case. On September 12, 2003, a truck passed near Tokyo Bay. The male driver saw something that looked like a body floating in Tokyo Bay. The man immediately reported it to the police, and it turned out that what looked like a body was indeed a corpse. The police immediately suspected foul play. They will conduct a forensic autopsy to identify the body. As a result, the body was identified as Satoru Sumaya, a 38-year-old freelance writer who covered the underworld and underground society. He had up to 8 stab wounds on his back and signs of a severe head blow. A body in such a gruesome state was found floating in Tokyo Bay. That alone makes for a very puzzling situation. But what puzzled the investigators the most was the condition in which Mr. Sumaya was found. Amazingly, his body was tightly wrapped with a heavy chain, secured with a belt like the ones used for diving. As a result of the subsequent investigation, Mr. Sumaya was found missing after September 5th, last heard from during a phone call with a magazine editor that day. And that's not all that was discovered during the investigation. On September 6th, the day after he went missing, his camera was found near Shibuya Station. The camera was found on the street and given to the police. But why? It was unclear why it was found in such a place. Based on these circumstances, investigators suspected that he might have been abducted by someone on the 6th when the camera was found, and they continued their investigation. Then, on September 7th, the day after the camera was found, An email was sent to one of his acquaintances under the name of Mr. Somaya. The content stated he was going on a trip, but this is where a puzzling point arises. That is, the sender's email address was not the one he usually used. It was not the one he usually used. However, at that time, his acquaintance knew that he often changed his email address frequently, and since he didn't know that he had gone missing, he didn't pay any special attention to it. It was later suspected that this email might have been sent by the person who killed him as part of a cover-up. It was also discovered that Mr. Somaya felt his life was in danger before he died. He often confided to his acquaintances that he was being targeted by the Chinese mafia and that he might be killed. And to support this, there are actual facts that someone was targeting him, such as parts of his home's balcony being destroyed and his windows being broken. There were also times when his work equipment, like his camera and computer, was stolen. However, because of the nature of his work, he was investigating many dangerous cases. So who was targeting him and for what purpose is still unclear even now. It wouldn't be surprising if he faced many dangers and made enemies. Though the investigation was expected to be difficult, surprisingly, the culprit was quickly identified just 10 days after he was found on September 22. Arrested on suspicion of murder and abandoning a body were Keizo Sakurai, who was 42 at the time, Yasutomo Kumamoto, who was 31, and Ryoichi Fuji, who was 34. To sum up their post-arrest statements, they attacked Mr. Somaya on the night of September 6. They restrained him and confined him in a room of an apartment. They inflicted severe violence, causing injuries. The next day, on September 7, they made him board a small boat and took him out for inspection. Then, they wrapped chains and belts around the body and went to Tokyo Bay. This way, we understood the circumstances when this incident occurred, but still, why? Why did these three conspire to kill Mr. Somaya? What was their motive? That was never clearly revealed. Sakurai, the ringleader, committed another crime just 3 months earlier in June 2003. He stated that the book he published became the reason for the murder. The name of the book is Kabukicho Underground. Through interviews, it delves into the behind-the-scenes of incidents that happened in Kabukicho. It's a book that exposes the reality. In it, although under a pseudonym, there is a section written about Sakurai. The content was somewhat abstract. Also, Somaya is said to have described Sakurai's work in his own writing in this way. Sakurai was running a key company and was plotting to sell copies of foreign products there. The book describes his abstract anger and anxiety about his work wrongdoing being exposed. Sakurai planned and carried out the murder of Mr. Somaya 2 weeks in advance. There was also a financial dispute between the two. That seems to have been one of the reasons for the murder as well. Next, regarding Kumamoto, who is an accomplice, he also stated that, like Sakurai, he was upset because he was criticized in Mr. Somaya's book, so he killed him. His experience as a professional diver helped him wrap chains and belts around Mr. Somaya's body, he said. And then, the other accomplice, Minoru Fuji, this person named Fuji, was actually working as Mr. Somaya's assistant. However, he stated that because there was unpaid compensation and he had disputes with Mr. Somaya, he cooperated in the murder. The three were initially charged with crimes such as unlawful confinement, but in the end, they were found guilty of murder. Sakurai, the ringleader, received a 16-year prison sentence. In this case, the perpetrators were arrested, their motives revealed, and a verdict issued. It seemed as though this would bring the case to a close. However, there were still major doubts remaining about this case. That's the link to the Petit incident, which happened about 2 months before Mr. Somaya was killed. He was investigating it until his death. Let me briefly explain the outline of the Petit incident here. On July 13, 2003, 4 6th-grade girls were kidnapped and confined in a room of an apartment in Minato Ward, Tokyo. The name of the person considered to be the perpetrator is Kotaro Yoshisato, who was 29 years old at the time. Yoshisato was involved in illegal activities with minors. He was running a dating club called Petit. This became the origin of the case's name. A few days after being confined, one girl escaped, alerted locals, and the case was discovered. And thanks to this girl's testimony, the remaining 3 were also safely rescued. However, Yoshisato attempted suicide in a different room from where he had confined the girls. And by the time he was found, he was already dead. Nevertheless, Yoshisato was already deceased. There are doubts about the circumstances, and even now people wonder whether Yoshisato was really the culprit, or if he was framed and killed by someone else. The debate never ends. The Petit Angel case is said to be deeply shrouded in darkness. Also, the Petit Angel case is considered to be deeply mysterious. Other factors played a role, and the case was discovered. It was widely covered in the news and media. One reason is that the investigation and media coverage abruptly ended. This explains why the investigation and reporting ceased. It is said that it was because something was found. That something was a customer list of people who used Petit Angel. It included politicians, doctors, bureaucrats, and other influential people. Over 2,000 elite citizens were reportedly listed. As a result, those on the customer list, the public was abuzz with suspicions that the case may have been covered up due to pressure from these people. At that time, Mr. Someya, who was investigating this case, was killed, so Mr. Someya is connected to the Petit Angel case. Many people voiced suspicions that he may have been silenced by those involved in the case. However, even though all the perpetrators were arrested in this case, why is that? Is it because such suspicions spread? One of the main reasons is the unnaturalness of the perpetrators' motives. The ringleader, Sakurai, was extremely violent and would feel criticized even by the slightest abstract comment. He had a personality that would thoroughly threaten anyone he felt criticized by. And he had been involved in multiple extortion cases in the past, so the police had marked him as a troublesome individual. Even so, no matter how furious Sakurai became in the past, he had never committed a murder. Isn't it strange that he suddenly went so far as to recruit accomplices to kill Someya-san? The motives of the two accomplices to commit murder are also questionable. Some believe their motives are too weak for the crime, leading to such speculation. People think the perpetrators might not have acted on their own. Could they have committed the crime under instructions from someone in the Petit Angel case? As mentioned, they're seen as the perpetrators of that case. Yoshisato's unnatural death is one reason people claim the case was covered up, citing the scene and other factors. Yoshisato died by suicide by hanging, but left no note. He withdrew a large sum of cash from the bank shortly before his death. Many argued Yoshisato's death wasn't suicide, noting that even if his suicide scenario were recreated, it shouldn't have caused death. There was speculation that Yoshisato's death was staged as a suicide, but was actually a murder by the person who killed Someya-san. All the perpetrators have been arrested, and some of their motives have been revealed. Regarding the Petit Angel case, there was a subsequent name on the customer list. There are also unfounded rumors going around, such as all 4 girls who were held captive at the time died under suspicious circumstances. No clear evidence has been found to support a connection with the murder of Mr. Someya. However, this is also just a rumor, but it is said that the Chinese mafia is involved in the Petit Angel case. He told an acquaintance he was being pursued by the Chinese mafia just before he disappeared. Is this a coincidence, or is it related to Mr. Someya? The murder occurred in 2003, and the main perpetrator, Sakurai, was sentenced to 16 years in prison. From the time the verdict was handed down, Sakurai is set for release in 2020. Sakurai. In the year. Sakurai was treated as a prison officer. There are people who don't want Sakurai to be released, so they try to extend Sakurai's prison term. Was there backstage manipulation? If true, Sakurai is Mr. Someya. He might know the truth behind the murder and the Petit Angel case. That's a possibility. He was scheduled to be released in 2020, but his sentence was extended by 2 years, meaning 2022. Right now, we don't know Sakurai's current situation, but if he were released and then reported as a victim, for example. As of 2022, the Petit Angel case still lingers. The darkness may not be over. This is the end. Satoru Someya lost his life in this case. I sincerely pray for his peaceful rest. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. This may be sudden, But have you ever investigated an unsolved case? Have you ever seen a television show like that? They use television to collect information nationwide. They work to solve the case or locate missing people, occasionally using psychics for help. There are even cases where investigations were conducted based on those results. Even with television's power, obtaining valuable information is difficult. In most cases, most programs end without any clear resolution. However, there are rare cases where people who contacted television programs, that eyewitness information became the key, leading to the arrest of the murderer. It was a murder case that had been considered a missing person case for as long as 5 years. What is the truth behind it? On March 10, 2000, Shigeo Ezawa, a heavy machinery operator in Mobara City, Chiba Prefecture. At the time, the 49-year-old suddenly disappeared, but the motive was unknown. His daughter was pregnant, and his grandchild was expected to be born in a few months. Mr. Ezawa eagerly anticipated his grandchild's birth. It was hard to believe he would disappear on his own in these circumstances. That's why his daughter and relatives believe he wouldn't leave voluntarily. They insisted it was unthinkable and kept searching, but the disappearance's truth stayed unknown. They couldn't find any clues to uncover the truth, and the case made no progress after that. Over 4 years later, in October 2004, it became a regular program. Rare for a show covering ongoing public investigations. Broadcast. The broadcast quickly requested information nationwide, and unexpectedly, a woman reported witnessing Mr. Ezawa being assaulted by 2 men. The woman said she knew the 2 men assaulting him, and both had bottles of alcohol. They kept beating Mr. Ezawa with such objects until he was covered in blood, she said. If this is true, the perpetrators might harm this woman. There is also a fear, so we need to confirm the circumstances. There is a possibility that they might flee or try to destroy evidence. With that in mind, the program staff chose not to broadcast this case. First, we will prepare an investigation report with the cooperation of a prominent lawyer. In November, we gave information to the Chiba Prefectural Police and requested an investigation. In response to this, the police began investigating the mysterious disappearance. They found this information valuable, established an investigation headquarters, and started a thorough investigation. 3 months later, on March 16, 2005, the program and Chiba Prefectural Police continued the investigation together. The case ultimately identified the perpetrator. Those arrested were Toshinori Uchiyama, 38, and Takao Nakayama, 30, and the 2 of them readily admitted to their crimes. According to the statements of both suspects, they encountered Mr. Ezawa on the night he went missing. That is, late at night on the day he disappeared. In early hours of March 11, 2000, Mr. Sawa went missing. At night, they cleaned the inside of the car, disposed of his belongings to destroy evidence, and first encountered Mr. Ezawa. They went back to the izakaya and illegally dumped his car. Because of these actions by the perpetrators, all clues disappeared, and the case remained unsolved for 5 years. Mr. Ezawa's illegally dumped car was already disposed of, but before that happened, since photos had been taken as evidence of the illegal dumping, the location where the car was dumped was identified. Although strong eyewitness testimonies like these were providing evidence that this case was not a disappearance caused by Mr. Ezawa himself, the crucial matter of Mr. Ezawa himself remained unresolved. He himself had not yet been found. When the program requested information about this case, the perpetrators also watched the broadcast, and then, fearing the case would be discovered, they acted immediately. They went to the place where they had thrown and abandoned him. What if he had died from the assault? His body would be there, but no matter how much they searched, they couldn't find his body. Based on the suspect's statements, The Chiba Prefectural Police put full effort into searching for Mr. Ezawa. However, because the suspect's memories were vague, they were ultimately unable to find Mr. Ezawa. Although the body was not found, a thorough judgment was made based on the situation and suspect's statements. It was concluded this was a murder, though until April 6, 2005, it had been seen as an injury case. The charges became murder, and the suspects were rearrested and prosecuted. And then, after the trial on May 23, 2006, the Chiba District Court handed down a guilty verdict to the two. Uchiyama was sentenced to 13 years in prison, and Nakayama was sentenced to 10 years. 6 years had passed since the incident occurred. Regarding this case, the Chiba Prefectural Police and other investigators acknowledged that the information provided by the television program was the key to solving the case. The program's achievements received much praise. In terms of the fact that the perpetrator was identified and arrested, there is no doubt that the case has progressed. However, since Mr. Ezawa himself has not been found, we cannot say that the case has truly been solved. His family continues to hope for his safety and wishes for the day they can see him again. Opinions on this case differ among individuals, including those in television and media. Perhaps you were able to feel the great power that the media holds. In fact, the woman who provided eyewitness information in this case decided to come forward after seeing the appeal on the program. However, while the program's achievements were being praised, there were also voices questioning why there had been no progress in the case for 5 years. They said the program's information led to the resolution, but what about the last 5 years of the investigation? How did a private television show gather better information than the police? What occurred before the case appeared on the program? It's unclear if any investigation was conducted, so whether there was negligence is unknown. Is it okay to call this a heartwarming story just because the program helped? The case isn't fully resolved. Regarding the search for Mr. Ezawa, what is the current situation? Is the search still ongoing? I believe that is the most important thing. This case shows the great power that television had at the time. On the other hand, it may have given us an opportunity to think about the way investigative agencies should operate, to lessen the number of people suffering daily from not knowing their loved ones' whereabouts. Are there any measures we can take? What do you all think? Lastly, I can only hope that Shigeo Ezawa, who was victimized in this case, will be found as soon as possible. Well then, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. Do you all usually use social media? What I especially want to ask this time is about LINE. It's very convenient because you can easily send photos taken with your smartphone and communicate easily with emojis and stickers. LINE is the most used app in Japan. It's also a social network and has recently seen active use in business. As of January 2020, it was announced that 83 million Japanese people are using LINE. This time, an exchange on LINE led to a fight that escalated into real life and took the life of a young girl, a story about a terrifying incident. The Hiroshima girl group assault and murder case, also known as the LINE incident. On June 28, 2013, Erika Kuros, who attended Hiroshima Funari Commercial High School, was involved. The 16-year-old's location was unknown at the time. About 2 weeks later, on July 13, she was found in a remote area based on someone's statement. She was found in the mountains in a completely changed state. The discovered body showed signs of severe assault. It was revealed that after being abducted, she was killed as a result of a group lynching. She lived with her mother, father, and younger brother, and they had a good family relationship. She was the kind of girl who would find time to make omelet rice for her younger brother. He loved his family and was loved by his family. A missing person report for the girl was filed on the 28th, the day she disappeared. Why? Why did she have to be killed? She murdered her friend and dumped the body in the mountains. The girl who confessed was a close friend of hers. Here are the case details. The night before the incident, June 27th, in a LINE group chat, she and Girl A got into a heated argument and traded harsh insults. In this group formed that day, 3,500 messages were exchanged in only 17 hours. Girl A called her out by name and insulted her, which led to an argument as she talked back. Angered, Girl A contacted 2 of her friends and had them invite her out to hang out. Around 4 a.m. on June 28th, they met. the middle of the shopping mall in the central shopping area. This place? Area. Benefit. $14,151,620,020,020. Sensing danger, the 7 people decide to put a towel in her mouth. Since she was going to die, they took her things, saying she wouldn't need her wallet or anything. They split the 44,000 yen cash among the 7. The car eventually stopped in the Hikamoni Mountains. When she was let out of the car, the towel was removed from her mouth, and Girl A felt jealous because Boy B's touch was gentle. Then, Girl A and 3 of the boys took the lead in assaulting her, and eventually strangled her to death. The body was thrown off the cliff like an object. Some time passed after that. Girl A was told by a friend on LINE that the girl might still be alive. When Girl A visited the scene again, what she saw was a body that had been completely devoured. It was unrecognizable from how it looked in life. She had become a completely changed figure. Girl A later turned herself in, saying the shock of that moment led her to confess. Before doing so, she left a LINE message. "Honestly, I don't know when I'll get out, but let's hang out again when I do." On July 12th, she killed her friend and dumped the body in the mountains. Girl A, with her mother, turned herself in at the police station and said she acted alone. The police immediately began their investigation, but since the body was not found that day, Girl A was temporarily sent home. But that night, she posted on LINE saying that she was thinking of running away and asking for help. The next morning, on the 13th, Girl A got on a bus and actually tried to run away. However, her mother quickly reported her to the authorities, causing her attempt to fail. During an evening police search, a body was found near Hihatsune Mountain's summit. Some parts had already become skeletal, and the remains were in such a gruesome state that even a simple DNA test could not identify the person. As a result of the autopsy, it was found that the small amount of remaining skin had numerous burn marks. No personal belongings like a wallet were found, but she was identified by dental records and DNA. On July 14th, following the discovery of the body, Girl A was arrested on suspicion of abandoning a corpse. She also said she went to the mountain with the victim and killed her. From her voluntary surrender on the 12th, she consistently claimed to have acted alone, but on July 17th, 3 days later, the chat history on LINE became a clue. 6 people, including Boy B, were arrested for abandoning a body. 5 admitted to the charges during questioning. Man C, the group's only adult, was present but denied some charges, stating the victim wasn't breathing. They opened their mouths. CL. Oh, there are also people who start living at their parents' home or at their mother's family home. She grew up there. When she was in the 6th grade of elementary school, her mother's boyfriend sexually assaulted Girl A. Even then, no one took it seriously. Her mother never hugged her, not once. Due to this environment, Girl A developed borderline personality disorder and attachment issues. She was believed to have these disorders and never felt she belonged in her parents' home. One day, Girl A met 3 other boys and girls. They called each other family and lived together in a 1DK apartment about a 10-minute walk from Hiroshima Station. Even though they weren't related by blood, it's easy to imagine that the 4 of them, all abandoned by their parents, relied on each other for emotional support. That's why if anyone tried to stop the violence midway, it would weaken their family standing and break group bonds. This psychological dynamic reportedly made stopping the violence impossible. Before the incident, to Girl A, the Hiroshima District Court also acknowledged this background. At the trial held on October 24, 2014, this was addressed. While acknowledging that the environment had a significant negative impact on her mental state, the court also pointed out the maliciousness of her actions, noting that she was the one who initially called the victim and that she consistently acted on her own initiative up to the murder and abandonment of the body. Because her motive was selfish and short-sighted, the court chose protective custody. The court could not recognize any special circumstances. As a result, Girl A was sentenced to 13 years in prison. This was an adult man. Except for C, he received the heaviest sentence among those involved in this case. The judge added the following regarding the treatment of Girl A. He decided that the case should be referred to the prosecutor. However, this doesn't mean compulsory education or treatment is unnecessary. It is unacceptable to justify the assault against her who hopes for compulsory education and medical involvement. Group lynching and murder are absolutely unacceptable acts. But is she the only one at fault? Or is it her parents who treated her so badly that it distorted her mind? One thing that's certain is that her younger brother will never be able to eat his sister's omelet rice again. How did you feel about this case? They were so close. They went to the same vocational school, and she wrote on her blog about loving him. The small misunderstandings between the two eventually developed into an irreversible incident. The person who caused this case, if even one of the 7 people had spoken up to stop it, the outcome might have been different. I sincerely pray for the soul of Erica Kuros, who passed away. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. That's all. Thank you. Actually, truth and lies led to Mori, the main culprit, being judged. The sentence was 7 years in prison, and the charge was injury resulting in death. Only a 7-year prison sentence. Many people, including the victim's family, could not accept such a short sentence. Why was this verdict given? What is the truth behind the case? Let's examine the incident's details. The victim in this case, Ms. K, was from Prefecture and graduated from high school in the spring of 2017. She died. Aiming to become a dental hygienist, she lived alone in Osaka and attended a vocational school. At night, she worked to earn money. She worked part-time at a cabaret club. Initially, her goal was to earn her tuition so as not to burden her family. However, she caught everyone's attention. With her beautiful features and friendly personality, she quickly became popular. Over time, working at the cabaret club became central to her life, making it hard to balance with her studies. She eventually decided to leave vocational school. Living this nightlife, Kokoro carried on with her life. Despite being a woman, she visited her family home 3 times a month. She was especially close to her mother and caring toward her family. That was the impression she gave. But around the summer of 2018, things started to change a little. Was it because she was tired from work, or did she have a change of heart and want to go back home? Gradually, she started to say things like this. And then on August 9th, 2 days before her body was discovered, feelings like frustration and all sorts of emotions welled up inside her, and she felt like crying. This post on social media ended up being her last words on the internet. 2 days later, on August 11th morning, as noted earlier, in Kakogawa City, Hyogo Prefecture, at Gangendam, Kei-san was discovered in a clothing case, with her appearance drastically altered. Police reported the following about her body's condition. There was no disturbance to her clothing, and the cause of death was asphyxiation due to pressure applied to her neck. A sandbag was tied to the clothing case for weight. Inside were her wallet, cosmetics, and other belongings. The body was found in the area, and cameras near the dam recorded Mori and Inaoka nearby. After that, he was arrested on suspicion of killing Ms. K. During the police investigation, Mori made the following statement. "She asked me to strangle her. I don't remember when I killed her, and I had no intention of killing her at all." He admitted to the charge of abandoning the body, but consistently denied any intent to kill. It is believed that the murder took place in the apartment room, and only Kei-san and Mori were there. The only testimony comes from Mori himself. Only circumstantial evidence serves as all the information available to uncover the truth of this case. And only circumstantial evidence leads to the clarification of the truth. The prosecution appealed, and on February 9, 2021, the appellate court delivered its verdict. There was no intent to kill, and the defendant's statement was deemed natural, so the appeal was dismissed. And as of March 2022, it is not clear whether the prosecution will file a final appeal and have the case reviewed by the Supreme Court. The judiciary has rendered its judgment on the crime of killing a person and abandoning the body. The sentence was 7 years in prison. Initially, online speculation suggested the sentence was too short, and a psychiatric evaluation might have occurred. There were also rumors of possible extenuating circumstances. And as for Inaoka, the accomplice, this is what he had to say about the case. "I just carried the cardboard box that was wrapped around the clothing case. I never imagined there was a body inside." He fully denies any connection to Mr. K and claims innocence. It's hard to believe Inaoka had no doubts about the box dumped in the dam. But still. In June 2019, the Kobe District Court handed down its decision. The sentence was 1 year and 6 months in prison, suspended for 3 years. It relied on circumstantial evidence and the suspect's statements. Is this really the truth behind the case? From here, I'd like to move on to my analysis of the case. But first, let's talk about the character of Mori, who is considered the main perpetrator. Mori, 20, from Osaka Prefecture, grew up wealthy and used his parents' credit cards to buy luxury brands. He lived lavishly, collecting luxury goods. He was abandoned by the police, who discarded him like trash at the dam. The police were abandoned at the dam, discarded by their own side. He would suddenly tell others she was his woman and that they had been intimate many times. That's right. However, Mori also had relationships with many other women, which was normal for him. Kei-san was reportedly just an outlet for his sexual desires and a way to make money for him. His accomplice Inaoka was 42 at the time of the crime. He was born in Osaka, but later moved to Kakogawa City in Hyogo Prefecture. After graduating from high school, he drifted from job to job, and he was always struggling with money. He eventually met Mori and was hired as a driver. Perhaps due to that relationship, Mori began bossing Inaoka around, despite Inaoka being over 20 years older. That's right, in this case, Mori, lacking a driver's license, had Inaoka transport the body to the dam. Kakogawa, where Inaoka lives, is the same place Kei-san's body was abandoned, the town with the dam. Inaoka's family home is about 6 kilometers from the dam, so it's believed Inaoka, familiar with the area, led in abandoning the body. It's possible that was how the decision was made. Maybe there's something hidden in this case, or the truth is being distorted. Because of the events so far, there are still all kinds of speculation being posted online about this case. For example, I previously mentioned suspicions about drugs. As I mentioned, there were traces of drugs found in her body. Maybe she was a habitual drug user. However, on the other hand, it's also possible that the drugs were provided by Mori. Is it possible that she was forced to take the drugs? Supporting this, it seems that Mori had made statements like this before, giving drugs to a woman and then having a physical relationship. How is that connected to this case and the drugs? We can only speculate, but maybe it will help uncover the truth. It might be one of the important points mentioned above. And the last words she posted on social media were things like, "I'm frustrated," and all sorts of feelings were overflowing. She felt like crying. I think the real truth of this case might be hidden in this short sentence. Did she argue with Mori or feel ignored? He claimed he killed her at her request. Mori's words still bother me, and she even told her parents. She discussed it only with Mori, without consulting anyone else. As a result, I can't help but think there might have been some other reason she had Mori kill for her. However, her truth will probably never be told. The only thing she has is her own side of the story. And what he has is her truth. Even now, I hope that the truth of this case will be revealed and that a fitting verdict will be delivered. I sincerely pray for Ms. K's soul, the victim in this case. Well then, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. Late night, January 25, 2016, Ota Ward, Tokyo, at the home of a restaurant worker and her 3-year-old child. Ayato-kun was assaulted by a man and died in this incident. The man was Naoya Nagatomi, who was 20 years old at the time. He was immediately arrested, but with Ayato-kun and Nagatomi and Ayato-kun had no blood relation. First, I would like to talk about Nagatomi's past in this case. When he was 3 years old, his parents divorced and his mother remarried. He was strictly disciplined about manners and behavior by his stepfather. He learned karate in elementary school and focused on basketball in junior high. He also achieved outstanding results in karate, such as winning major tournaments. He won judo championships in addition to karate, but after that, he wasn't able to go on to high school and ended up working in demolition. But he didn't stick with it for long. He has always had a rough personality. He was in a very rough state. Rita Chichi. In the midst of wanting to know, I will meet Ayato-kun's mother, who is the victim this time. In this case, it was acknowledged that Nagatomi, the suspect, did not intend to kill Ayato-kun. The charge is not murder, but rather bodily injury resulting in death. And in the trial, the reasons why the assault escalated to the point of killing gradually became clear. Now, here are the details of the trial. The defendant, Nagatomi, entered the courtroom. He is over 190 centimeters tall and weighs about 130 kg. His martial arts experience gave him a robust, imposing look. He also had a sharp gaze, glancing around the courtroom as if glaring at everyone. And then the trial began. First, the defense attorney explained why he ended up living together with this woman. Hikonaga Tomihiko met this woman through social media around the summer of 2015, about half a year before the incident. Shortly after they met, he apparently stayed at her house for about a week as a guest. Then about 6 months later in January 2016, Hikonaga Tomihiko again. He contacted this woman for the first time in several months, asking if they could meet now. The prosecution asked why he contacted her after half a year, and Hikonaga Tomihiko said that his mother blamed him for not going to work. He said he ran away from home while he was in the middle of running away, but he had nowhere to go. He contacted the woman who had let him stay for a week 6 months earlier again. That's right. At first, he promised the woman he would only stay for 3 days. However, even after 3 days had passed, he didn't leave the woman's house. The woman asked, "Why aren't you leaving?" He initially made excuses and dodged the question. Gradually, he started yelling at her, so she couldn't even warn him anymore. It seems that this became the environment, and because of this, Takatomi Hiko's 3-week-long stay as a freeloader began. Maru. They chose to discipline the child so Taki wouldn't be teased at kindergarten. From that day, Nagatomi, the defendant, began to strictly discipline Ayato-kun. When Ayato-kun disobeyed, the defendant called it discipline and slapped him. The mother, who witnessed such situations firsthand, spoke about it like this in court. When I tried to intervene, I was afraid I might get hurt. As you can see from this fearful testimony, already this household was controlled by Nagatomi's violence. However, at this point, he apparently wasn't thinking about becoming Ayato's father, and Nagatomi believed that he was disciplining out of goodwill. But he felt unappreciated for things like cooking and doing the laundry. He felt neither the mother nor Ayato appreciated him. He couldn't understand why their attitude toward him became so cold, and those feelings gradually turned into anger. On top of feeling unstable about his place, he was treated like a nuisance, and his sense of isolation grew, which he ended up releasing through violence. He said that he fell into a negative cycle. And then, about 3 weeks after he started staying with them, while the three of them were having dinner together, Ayato-kun looked at defendant Nagatomi with a glare. That's right. At that moment, Nagatomi's pent-up anger exploded. He grabbed Ayato-kun by the chest and threw him with all his strength. He then took a kitchen knife and threatened Ayato-kun, saying he might kill him. At that point, even his mother sensed the danger. She somehow managed to persuade Nagatomi to put the knife back. Although things calmed down for the moment, Nagatomi's violence did not stop. In fact, it is said to have escalated even further. Tokun. Tomi means Nagatomi. Hai means Ayato-kuni. Nagatomi Hai refers to Ayato-kun. Nagatomi Hi refers to Ayako-kuni. Nagatomi defendant refers to Aya. Tomi defendant refers to Ayato-kun. Tomi gently approached Naga-kun and expressed concern for Ayato-kun's health. Then, Nagatomi defendant said that since he was breathing, he would be fine. When I checked, Ayato-kun had rolled over in his sleep, so I thought he was okay. That's right. However, the next day, Ayato-kun developed a 38-degree fever, vomiting and sweating. Symptoms started to appear. Experts later said that these were symptoms of subarachnoid hemorrhage. His mother tried to take him to the hospital right away, but in response, he threatened her. If you go to the hospital, they'll learn about the abuse, and you'll get arrested since you were with me. Of course, the woman hadn't abused him, so there was no way she would be arrested. But she was in a panic. Because of that, she wasn't able to make a rational decision. In the end, they didn't take him to the hospital. And as a result, 24 hours after the assault, Ayato's condition suddenly worsened, and they called an ambulance. They explained to the paramedics who arrived that he was injured after falling from a slide in the park. Yes, and unfortunately, he was taken away in an ambulance. Ayato-kun was in cardiopulmonary arrest at that point, and his death was confirmed after transport. After that, the woman told the paramedics the truth, and the police were immediately notified and arrived quickly. But Nagatomi was already gone from the woman's house. However, he was found wandering nearby and was subsequently arrested. In court, the woman said he had been her support. She said after he left, she felt responsible and that reflecting would never be enough. There were also harsh online opinions about the woman regarding this matter. And finally, the woman left words for Nagatomi, saying that she wants him to atone for what he has done. And then, the verdict will be given to Nagatomi. 8 years in prison. The presiding judge stated that since he justified the violence as discipline, there were no circumstances in his motive that could be taken into consideration. On the other hand, he also mentioned the results of the psychiatric evaluation. It was pointed out that he has a temperament where, once he exceeds his limit of patience, he can't stop himself. The verdict reportedly also considered his sexual development and inherent traits. Also, right after the crime, Nagatomi contacted another woman and told her, "I love you," which suggests that the prosecution pointed out that he lacked any real feelings for Ayato-kun, and that he committed selfish acts of violence under the guise of discipline. One reason for this case is believed to be that Nagatomi also experienced a harsh environment as a child. I can't accept that explanation. The case happened in 2016, and the sentence was 8 years in prison, which means the day when inmate Nagatomi returns to society is not far off. I sincerely pray for Ayato-kun's soul to rest in peace. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. In October 2006, a 4-year-old boy drowned in Daisen City, Akita Prefecture. In April that year in Akita Prefecture, 2 elementary school children were involved in an incident in Fujisato town. A murder case had just occurred, and at that time, another incident happened in Akita Prefecture. This drew nationwide attention. Regarding this prefecture, it is said that someone actually spent time in prison with the perpetrator. We also received information from others, and I would like to share that information as well. Akita Prefecture. A person was found drowned in Daisen City, Akita Prefecture. It was later revealed that Ryosuke-kun died from asphyxiation, and I heard the initial report of the incident. His mother cried out for Ryosuke and collapsed on the spot. After that, she was left in a state of shock. She got through the funeral and was then hospitalized. Because of this, she attracted public attention as a tragic mother. Initially, the police saw this case as an accident rather than a crime. However, due to Ryosuke-kun's condition, they suspected foul play and launched an investigation. And then, the ones who were arrested were, shockingly, Ryosuke-kun's mother, Mika Shindo, who was 31 at the time, and her boyfriend, Hiroshi Hatakeyama, who was 43 at the time. At that time, suspect Shindo was with Ryosuke-kun. She lived with Ryosuke-kun and another boyfriend, not suspect Hatakeyama. The three were together. In other words, she was having an affair with suspect Hatakeyama, and together with her lover, they killed Ryosuke-kun. Furthermore, after that, an astonishing fact was revealed. Amazingly, suspect Shindo was also dating several other men she met through online dating sites. In addition to these 2 men, did Ryosuke-kun become an obstacle because she prioritized her own life and relationships? Afterward, suspect Shindo admitted to the crime and gave the following statement. At the time of the crime, I was in the car parked at the roadside station with Mr. Hatakeyama and Ryosuke-kun. While we were having sex, the child woke up and was noisy, so I killed him. I suffocated him by hitting his head and face and covering his mouth. After Ryosuke-kun stopped moving, I threw him into the irrigation canal and left him. The first trial for defendant Shindo was then held. Shindo stated that Ryosuke-kun interrupted him during sexual activity in the car, explaining his motive for the crime. He testified that Hatakeyama became angry and told him to hit Ryosuke. He also said defendant Hatakeyama had repeatedly asked him to marry her. She hinted at it, and he didn't want to lose her. At the first trial, he said that when he committed the violence on her orders, Hatakeyama was the one covering Ryosuke's mouth. And the defense attorney for defendant, Shindo, also said that defendant Shindo was under the influence of defendant Hatakeyama. They also argued that the violence and leaving him in the waterway were not actions he took on his own initiative. That will be the focus, but defendant Hatakeyama has consistently denied the charges and maintained his stance. Ultimately, it was given to defendant Shindo. The murder verdict resulted in a 14-year prison sentence. 8 days later, the verdict was delivered. Defendant Shindo appealed, but on August 27, 2007, because the defendant consistently withdrew the appeal, the sentence was finalized. Defendant Hatakeyama ultimately ordered Shindo to commit the murder. He was seen as the ringleader, and the Supreme Court upheld his 16-year sentence. That concludes the case overview. From here on, we will talk about convict Shindo after he was sent to prison, as well as the details of the case in which he was considered the ringleader. Hatakeyama. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Child killers, along with sexual abusers, are the most bullied targets. While in the shared cell, her cellmate said, "Just being alive is a nuisance." She was bullied almost every day, being told things like, "Go to your child and get on your knees and apologize," and "Just looking at you makes me angry." Was she regretting her own crime, or was life in prison just too hard for her? Incredibly, after that, she tried to hang herself but failed, and her neck ended up twisted. She wore a corset in that condition and kept doing factory prison labor. That's what happened. Possibly as a result of her suicide attempt, she appeared to have brain damage. She could only answer in short sentences, regardless of what anyone said or asked. Still, the bullying continued. Due to her selfish motives and cruelty, Shindo was labeled the Demon Mother by the public. That was who she was, but originally, in middle and high school, she was a reserved student, and not the type to date multiple men. However, signs of her madness were already apparent during her middle school years. It was just after her third-year middle school summer break. At that time, she had a best friend, but that friend stopped coming to school. The reason was bullying, and unbelievably, the one who was bullying her best friend was her. This comes up again in later episodes, but even back then, when someone she got close to didn't do what she wanted, she would take some outrageous actions. That was around 1996. She began dating a man she met through a magazine pen pal ad. It seems that the man she was seeing was a firefighter, but he soon distanced himself from her and she lost contact with him. Then she took an outrageous action. Around this time, there were several small fires at train stations in Akita Prefecture, where she lived. Luckily, none of these incidents became major fires. Because of her physique. Although she showed such a bizarre side, she actually got married once to a man she met through a dating site before she had Ryosuke in 2000. At that time, she had a baby girl, but her madness did not stop. Her marriage with her first husband ended after just 3 months. She lived with her husband, mother-in-law, and father-in-law, but she showed a very short temper, which caused problems in the family, and she would suddenly leave for somewhere. She also had a tendency to wander off, and in the end, she got divorced while pregnant. She demanded 5 million yen in child support, but they settled for 1 million yen, and she cut ties with her ex-husband's family. The child born afterward was left in her parents' care. In 2002, about 2 years later, she remarried. It was here that Ryosuke-kun was conceived. She began living with her husband at his home. However, this time, with the help of her father-in-law and mother-in-law, she devoted herself to raising Ryosuke-kun, and it seemed like the marriage was going well. After her father-in-law died and her husband's younger sister, who lived with them, got married, she was often alone with her mother-in-law during the day. There, once again, her short temper began to show. All of her irritation was directed at her mother-in-law, and at its worst, she even became violent. After her divorce, she entered her second marriage. Things didn't work out again, and she ended up getting custody of Ryosuke-kun. But once more, she demanded 5 million yen as alimony and child support. In response, her husband threw his bank book and seal at her. She shouted, "Even 5 million yen isn't enough. Give me 10 million. Her husband replied, "Then I'll die and pay you. Take all the insurance money." Shockingly, he poured kerosene on himself and set himself on fire. Luckily, the fire was put out and he survived. Afterwards, they fought over custody of Ryosuke-kun, and in the end, she took him in. And finally, her frustration started to be directed at Ryosuke-kun. Around 2004, Ryosuke-kun and she were living together in a mother and child support facility. There, she would hit Ryosuke-kun and give him sleeping pills. She was revealed to be violent. It was determined that if left unattended, it could be fatal, so Ryosuke-kun, like her eldest daughter, was placed in her parents' home. However, after that, she soon returned to her parents' house and began living together with her eldest daughter and Ryosuke-kun. The Child Consultation Center was aware of the circumstances leading up to this. Since the grandparents live with them, they've chosen to monitor the situation. Perhaps because the parents were keeping a close watch, There were no major problems at that time. However, another turning point came for her. As expected, it was about romance. By then, she was reportedly already involved with Mr. Hatakeyama. She met him on a dating site, and they began seeing each other. She moved to the apartment of another man. Because of his work, the man was often away from home, so she was living almost alone with Ryosuke. And then, as expected, the abuse began. One summer morning, a neighbor saw Ryosuke crying in front of the house. That's right, but he had bruises on his face like those you get when someone hits you, and immediately, among the parents at the daycare, there were suspicions of abuse. However, Ryosuke was never taken into protective custody, and the day of the incident arrived. On October 25, 2006, Shindo, Hatayama, and Ryosuke met up and moved to a hot spring inn where they stayed overnight. The next day was Monday, but the two adults took the day off work, went sightseeing, and stopped by a roadside station along the way. And then, not long after that, the incident occurred. After that, the police began investigating both as an incident and as an accident. However, in order to confirm the circumstances, they questioned her about the situation. Then, he said that the woman returned home from going out around 5 p.m. and was preparing dinner. Around 5:30 p.m., her son suddenly disappeared. Even though he told such complete lies, he couldn't fool the police. A 4-year-old child went out alone in the rain, without an umbrella or raincoat, and ended up in an irrigation canal 400 meters away, suffering a blow so severe that his skull was caved in. And finally, suspicion fell on the two of them, leading to their arrest. However, in fact, there are even claims that in this case, there might be a possibility of wrongful conviction regarding Hatakeyama. Shizumune said during the trial that he acted on Hatakeyama's orders. He said he hit with a coffee can that still had contents. After Ryosuke-kun's blood splattered, he wiped it with a towel. That was the testimony. However, the can of coffee used as the weapon and the towel have not been found. Also, no evidence, including anything related to the murder scene of Ryosuke-kun or the marriage, has been found in defendant Hatakeyama's car. They were having sex in a parked car at a roadside station, even though it was still daylight and visible to others. This is also a matter that needs to be deliberated. During the trial, his consistent denial of the charges was seen as showing no remorse. Hatakeyama. Here is the testimony of Hatakeyama. I parted ways with the two of them at the roadside station. I didn't assault anyone in the car, nor did I give any orders. Only the two of them know the truth, though. A trash can installed at a parking area. From such an ordinary everyday scene, something unbelievable was discovered. Amazingly, it was a human arm. More body parts were later found. Parts of the body were discovered in various locations. The perpetrator was a necrophile, a sadistic killer who murdered for pleasure. The public believed the Sako killer committed the crime. However, the person who was actually arrested later was an ordinary housewife. The motive for the crime was a complicated romantic relationship. This might not be something that has nothing to do with you either. Fukuoka hairdresser, dismemberment murder case. On March 3, 1994 at Kyushu Expressway, Tamana District, Kumamoto Prefecture. The incident came to light when something was discovered in a trash can installed at the parking area. As stated earlier, it was a severed, blackened human left arm. It was in a plastic bag when the cleaner found it. Then, another hour later, after that, the police arrived immediately. They set up an investigation headquarters, conducted inspections and interviews, and used DNA testing to identify discoveries. It was confirmed that all the body parts belonged to the same person. At first, the identity of the victim was difficult to determine, but through matching with the missing persons report that had been filed, the victim was identified as 30-year-old Mayumi Iwasaki, an employee at Vivid Beauty Salon in Fukuoka City. The investigation headquarters searched the victim's apartment, the beauty salon where she worked, and the store that was managed by the same owner. They began investigating the company's office. As a result, bloodstains belonging to Mr. Iwasaki were detected in the company's office using a luminol reaction. It was revealed that the company's office was the scene of the crime. Therefore, the police concluded a work-related person was the culprit. They believed it was highly likely, and one suspect emerged. That suspect was the person in charge of accounting at the beauty salon where Mr. Iwasaki worked, Fumiko Ada, who was 38 years old at the time. Eda is believed to have abandoned the body. The three rented a car in Fukuoka City for 2 days. Starting March, 2 Ida's fingerprints were also found on a Kyushu Expressway toll ticket, where the body's parking lot was located. The left wrist was wrapped. The advertisement paper had a small circulation. One of the reasons was that it had been distributed to the home of Ida's acquaintance. Then, 12 days after the first left arm was discovered, on March 15, the investigation headquarters tried to question Ada, the suspect, in detail on suspicion of abandoning a corpse. But she completely denied any involvement in the case. She claimed that she was also being threatened by the perpetrator. As evidence, Ada said, "You're next." It said, "You'll be cut into pieces." She submitted the threatening letter. However, about a week after her arrest, Ada finally began to make statements touching on the core of the case and admitted to the crime. Why? Ada killed and dismembered Mr. Iwasaki. Did she leave the body parts in different locations? Next, we'll discuss how Ada ended up committing the crime. Ada was an ordinary housewife with a husband 7 years older than her and 2 children. That was her situation, but she still owed on her house. She started working as a sales clerk at a boutique in Fukuoka City. About a year later, a friend helped her get an accounting job at beauty salon Bibito, so she switched jobs. She worked energetically, and after 2 years, she was promoted to manager. Work was going well, but things at home were tense, and the relationship between husband and wife was poor. She also had a reputation in the neighborhood for being flashy and mean-spirited. At the beauty salon where she worked, there was a man named Mr. B who worked in accounting. Ada gradually developed feelings for Mr. B. However, both Mr. B and, of course, Ada already had families. He harmed her body, killed her, and continued to harm and kill her body. Did Eda dislike that Mr. B kept bringing up Iwasaki, who was younger than him? Gradually, he began to hate Iwasaki. He started speaking ill of Iwasaki to other employees and began to avoid Iwasaki. And then Eda started thinking, maybe the two of them are already in a relationship. He hired a detective agency to investigate Iwasaki, but they found nothing suspicious. Iwasaki was beautiful, skilled, and well-regarded at work, which led to many invitations from men. But she reliably declined those invitations. Ada's suspicions might be called a misunderstanding, but instead of fading, his doubts only grew stronger daily. They accelerated even more. Ada disguised himself, trailed Mr. Iwasaki, and made silent calls to his home. He started doing things like that to harass him. Because of Ida's words and actions like that, Mr. B gradually became more and more dissatisfied. Mr. B started to hint at ending the relationship with Ida, and their relationship got worse and worse. Then came February 25, 1994. On this day, Mr. Iwasaki visited the office to discuss work, and there he met Ada and Minoru. It became a 4-hour argument. The argument concerned Ms. B, but it completely shocked Mr. Iwasaki. To Ada, that reaction made Mr. Iwasaki seem like he was just pretending not to know. He became even angrier, of course, but it was all just Ada's misunderstanding. The next day, Mr. B told Ada the apartment lease would be canceled, making their breakup final. Maybe it was just bad timing, but this is what happened to Ada. He blames Mr. Iwasaki for everything. Thinking this way, he directs his anger toward Mr. Iwasaki. The next morning, February 27th, Eda called Mr. Iwasaki to the office. Then the two argued again and their anger peaked. Eda grabbed a kitchen knife that was in the kitchen and suddenly attacked Mr. Iwasaki, stabbing him multiple times and killing him. After that, Eda, fearing the discovery of the incident, tried to cover it up. Thinking he couldn't carry the body by himself, Eda used a saw from the toolbox and the kitchen knife. He cut off the head, both arms, and both legs from the torso, then also removed the flesh from the waist and cut off the wrists. The dismembered body was then placed into a suitcase and black plastic bags. He carried them to his home. After that, Eda returned to the office. Eda dumped the head at a nearby garbage site. That's right. But in the end, the head, the right wrist, and the murder weapon were never found. After that, Eda sent a letter to Iwasaki-san's home, wishing her success at her new job, to emphasize that he was not the perpetrator of this crime. That's what he wrote. He sent the letter, and when the series of incidents was reported in the news, he created a false threatening letter and showed it to Mr. B. He pretended as if he was also being targeted. However, he couldn't deceive the police. About 2 weeks later, he was arrested for abandoning a body. After confessing, he was rearrested on April 5th for murder. On April 26th, he was indicted on charges of murder and abandoning and damaging a body. He admitted guilt for damaging the body, but claimed innocence regarding the murder. At the first trial, defendant Eda stated this. He claimed that the killing was an act of self-defense. However, in response to this, the presiding judge stated that the defendant, her boyfriend, and the victim were in a close relationship. He grew more suspicious of this and determined that she harbored feelings for him. Regarding self-defense, considering the nature of the weapon and the extent and location of the wounds, that murderous intent was clear. The defendant's claim was denied, resulting in a 16-year prison sentence. In June 1999, Eda's sentence was finalized. Before the arrest, the victim's breasts and organs were gouged out, which experts saw as an attempt at sexual gratification. They called it a lust murder because the body was mutilated after death, indicating necrophilic tendencies. There was public speculation that the crime was committed by a psychopathic murderer with sexual abnormalities. Although Eda, the defendant, was considered the main perpetrator of the murder of Mr. Iwasaki, there were rumors that the real mastermind was someone else, and that there was a deep darkness surrounding this case. This case, because it was said that Ely was in charge of the investigation, it was handled this way. It turns out that the true identity of this man is said to be the son of a historic hospital in Fukuoka. There are two theories about this man's involvement. First, he had a relationship with Mr. Iwasaki, who was killed, and they had a child together, but apparently that caused problems, so he held a grudge against Mr. Iwasaki. Eda helped him, and they chose to kill. He also managed the money flow as the beauty salon's accountant. Eda gave money to this man and continued their affair. Mr. Iwasaki noticed the money irregularities and was killed by them. And after the incident was discovered, the hospital used the Bar Association and politicians to protect their son. This case proceeded as if Eda acted alone, but later he thought the investigation would reach him. This man went to America alone and committed suicide there. It's just a rumor. But even now, many locals still believe this theory is the truth. However, since the police investigation later concluded that there were no accomplices, I have to add that the authenticity of this theory remains uncertain. About 30 years after this incident occurred, in July 2023, Eda has completed his sentence and been released. The incident stemmed from a housewife's hatred of her romantic rival. A bizarre case. Do you have someone you love so much it drives you crazy? Well then, that's all for this time. Thank you for watching.